Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good evening. My name is Arlene Hunter, and I'm the city manager for Bonita Springs, and we greatly appreciate you being here this evening. This is an important process for the city. We are working on our updates to the City of Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan, and this process actually started over a year ago. We began with the state-mandated process of reviewing it's called an evaluation and appraisal review of our comp plan, and we provided those findings to the state of Florida so that we would remain in compliance. And that gives the city the opportunity to continue to pursue grant dollars, projects, and to be in compliance with state statute. The next step of that process is for us to look at what particular changes we may want to make to the comprehensive plan. But this also includes state-required changes. So there is a set of changes that the state does mandate that we will update as part of our 7-year review process. But at this time, the City Council also elected an opportunity to look at where does it make sense to make additional changes to the comp plan. So that's a part of this process, is to gain that public feedback. I did want to make a couple introductions and kind of go over a little bit of a process. With us this evening, we have our mayor, Rick Steinmeier, if you could stand and wave. We also have the pleasure and our opportunity, and we greatly appreciate them being here and their service to the city. We have members of our zoning board. Our vice chairman, Ben Hershenson, is here. Member Bruce Galloway is here. And member Gary Gambrell is here as well. They spend tons of time and energy in reviewing projects for us, so we greatly appreciate the time and dedication they make to the city. We also have the pleasure this evening of welcoming our Vice Chair, Steve Lohan of the Local Planning Agency. Member Don Calapetro. And member Daniel Doogie. So thank you so much. They also review many amendments to the comprehensive plan. They also take the time to review ordinances to make sure they're consistent with the vision of the city, and we appreciate the volunteer time that they take. The reason why I also point these folks out to you is that they are under the requirement of the state of Florida's sunshine laws, specifically the mayor, and so they are here to observe and to take in your feedback and the process, but they are going to reserve their comments for when they sit officially at the dais of their respective boards so that we fully comply with our sunshine regulations as well. So with that, we have with us Dr. Margaret Banyan, virtually. And we're very grateful to her and her dedication to continue to work with the city. She was able to work with us through our first update, the comprehensive plan, and now we're continuing that process in our second round. I'll share with you in September, I'll be with the City of Bonita Springs 19 years. Dr. Banyan and I have had the opportunity to work through this is our second 7-year process. I was 12 when I started, I promise. So it's having her longevity and her institutional knowledge is just wonderful and grateful for that part of this process. Behind me is Dr. Green with Florida Gulf Coast University. And also one of our graduate students, Victoria. And they're all going to help in this process. And one of the great partnerships we've had with FGC over the years is that we're able to utilize students to help us in the process. And we greatly appreciate that knowledge that brings as well. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Banyan. One last housekeeping thing, Mike Sheffield, right back there, is our city clerk. If you haven't had a chance to sign in, I think he was passing that around. If you could please, that does help us for our records to show the public participation. So if you could please sign in with him as well if you haven't had a chance to. And then also, Mike will have available some forms. So if you'd like to add or provide more feedback on any type of form, you're always welcome to email that to us, but you can also write it on the form, and Mike will have those forms for you as well. So with that, Dr. Banyan, I turn it over to you.
Well, I really appreciate seeing a great turnout that's always really helpful for us because a lot of the feedback that you provide are things that we need to consider and incorporate as we work through this process. So I have a presentation, and then what we'll do is divide people up and have you give input, and then we'll come back for some additional questions. And before I do that, I also want to introduce Jason Wells, who's on virtually as well. Jason is a graduate student and helping us with the process as well. And I believe there are also city staff in the room that can help answer questions. So the rest of the staff, can you raise your hand so people know who you are?
That would be Jackie Jensen, Planning and Zoning Manager.
Yes, thank you. I can't see the whole room, so I'm guessing a little bit about what I'm seeing. So I'm going to share the presentation with you. So again, just sort of here's our rough agenda: introductions, presentation, and then input session and questions. We'll try to wrap about 6:45 so that we can spend some time with questions. Some of your questions you may have answered as you move about the room tonight. So we want to reconvene and make sure you do have a chance if there's things that you really have questions about the process or any of the content. So I want to start a little bit by describing the city's comprehensive plan, what it is, and in some parts what it is not. So the comprehensive plan for the city, its intent is to really describe the long-term vision for the future. And you see that expressed in elements. So there's a land use element, there's a transportation element, housing element, etc. And in each of those elements, you're going to see sort of these longer range policies, programs, and to some extent priorities for public investments. So it's a high level, fairly policy driven document, and in some part it guides the physical development of the city, which is really important to residents and really important, like Arlene talked about, to grant making and how the city moves forward. There's a lot of requirements for the comprehensive plan at the state level. And so some of the things that you see in the comprehensive plan currently for the city are because of those requirements at the state level. The other thing you'll see when you look at the comprehensive plan is it's divided into goals, objectives, and policies. So goals are the big goals, objectives are a bit more specific, and then policies move a little bit towards those things that the city can implement. So you'll see more specifics in the policies. We call them GOPs. So when you see that word GOPs, what that means in the context of the comprehensive plan is goals, objectives, and policies. I want to make sure you know where you can see the full comprehensive plan, and that's online. It's documented with a service called MuniCode. And the address is here, but if you forget the address or don't have access and want to look it up quickly, MuniCode, if you look at library.municode.com, it has a map, and then you can click and drill down to the City of Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan. So at some point, you know, if you have a chance and you would like to look to see what some of those goals, objectives, policies are, that's a good place to look. It's kept fairly current, so as amendments are made, you'll see the last version of the plan there. And this is just kind of a screenshot about what you'll see when you enter into MuniCode. And again, it's all available there. But we can also answer questions if any members of the public have more questions. One thing I like to talk about is how the comprehensive plan is related to other tools and other documents in the city. So the comprehensive plan, in some ways, forms sort of the basis for some of the policies. And again, it's broad, intended to be longer term focused. And Then, the comprehensive plan relies on land development code for many of the specifics. So, whereas you might see height restrictions in the comprehensive plan, you would see much more specifics in land development code about where do you measure height from. And so some of those things in terms of implementing the comprehensive plan, you'll see those in land development code. So zoning and regulations regarding zoning often is in the land development code. And then there's other documents that interact with the comprehensive plan. You might see some elements of vision or some elements that more specifics, priorities, and funding availability. You might see that in city ordinances. You might see that in the city strategic plan or other documents. And really the goal is that each of these documents work together and they're consistent with each other. I want to show you a little bit now because we're going to talk a little bit about the requirements for the updates. Just know that the comprehensive plan has a map series and some fairly important map series. And we'll ask you about some of these things tonight. But this map here is in the comprehensive plan, and it's the long-range future land use map. This is not a zoning map, right? So it doesn't have a lot of specifics, but the comprehensive plan for each of these categories talks about what's appropriate in these land use categories. So I'll share with you a question about why that's relevant for tonight. And if you haven't seen this map, it's worth a chance to look at. This is also on the city's website, but it is also in Unicode where you could go look at the other maps that are in the comprehensive plan. And you'll see that there's a number of different future land use categories that are in the city, each with their own kind of specific designations. So I want to move a little bit to what we're doing tonight in terms of process and give you some perspective. So every 7 years, the state of Florida requires that cities and counties look at their comprehensive plan. They call it the Evaluation and Appraisal Review. So another acronym for you is EAR. So if we talk about EAR, we're talking about the comprehensive plan, EAR, Evaluation and Appraisal Review. So every 7 years, the city has to look at its comprehensive plan, and I'll create a bit of nuance here, and determine if it's consistent with state legislation. More specifically, changes in state legislation. So every 7 years go by, the state's made a number of changes. Some of those are relevant to the comprehensive plan. So the city has to make sure that it is consistent with those changes in state legislation. So the last time this was required, we just completed the Evaluation and Appraisal Review EAR in April. It was due April 1, 2023. We met that deadline. And then the state says, okay, if you have any changes to make to be consistent with state legislation and its changes, then you have to make those amendments within 1 year. We call those EAR-based amendments, and those are due for the city of Bonita Springs, April 1, 2024. So those are important deadlines to meet, and it's an important part of the process that we'll talk a little bit more about. This EAR is also available on the city's website, and we can provide you with the where to access this. It's a pretty long document, and it goes through a lot of data and analysis about the state of the city. I want to share with you a little bit about where we're at in the timeline. So around May 2022, we started the research for the Evaluation Appraisal Review. Then we created the EAR report and submitted that by April 1, 2023. And now we're in the amendment stage. And so that amendment stage, again, those amendments are due to the state by April 1, 2024. So we're drafting the amendments now, which is why we're having public meetings and during season. So we're in draft stage. Those will go to the LPA, and you see members of the LPA in your meeting here tonight for a hearing. And then they'll go to City Council for what we call a transmittal hearing. That transmittal hearing is scheduled to be March 6th to meet the state deadline. Then the state reviews the work that's been done on those EAR-based amendments. And the state has 30 days for that review. State comments will come back, and then council, again, if there's anything the state says is not up to snuff or needs to be addressed, there will be some time to make those last minute changes before a final adoption. And so the city council will have a final adoption hearing. And the reason why we don't really have an end date is because it is not always immediate, right? If there are changes to be made based on the state review, then there's a little bit more time built into the process for that. So that's what you can kind of expect in terms of timeline for completion. But a little bit more specifics are on this slide, where you see the LPA transmittal is scheduled for February 22nd this year. And then we expect to have another public meeting where we share with you the draft amendments, as well as drop-in sessions. So we're going to spend you can also think of it as office hours, where I'll be on site to be able to take any feedback or comments, and another public meeting so you can provide comments on the amendments themselves. That's tentatively scheduled for March 5th. And then we'll have the City Council transmittal hearing on March 6th. Then the state will go back and do their review, and then we'll have the council adoption hearing. At all of those points in the process, you'll have an opportunity for additional public comment, except for the state review portion. But all of those will provide opportunity for public comment. So feel free, if there's things that you want to come talk about, you can come support the amendments, you can come provide comments on nuance with the amendments. So all of those are open to the public. So I want to turn a little bit to the EAR findings and talk about sort of why we have the questions in front of you that we have tonight. So if you open up the EAR, what you'll find, and it's a big long table at the back of the document, we call it Appendix B. That is where our team went through every policy, every goal, objective, and policy in the city's comprehensive plan to determine one of three things. One is no comment. The policy's fine as it is. There's nothing really substantial that we could see needing to be amended. And then the second category was what was required by the state. So anything that required that changes in state law that required amendment. And we also noted things that were consistent with state statute. So that's in that kind of column or bucket called state required. And then the last column or bucket of comments, you'll see what we call optional amendments. And these are things that goals, objectives, or policies that may not be currently stated in a way to meet the city's goals. That's a really broad statement, right? So we want to narrow down a little bit about those optional amendments. The team did not suggest that all of those optional amendments be addressed at this point. There's quite a few, but we really took a broad view in looking at those optional. After that point, when we created the EAR and developed that table, then we started to narrow down. Okay, we know we have to do the state required amendments. That's required. And are there optional amendments that are of a higher priority that the city might want to amend? And so the scope that we ended up with was, again, address what's required by the state. We know we have to do that. But also then amend them for high priority goals, objectives, policies. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we meant by high priority and share with you a little bit of our thinking about that. But first, I want to talk about sort of the state required update examples, and then I'll turn to what we're seeing as more of the higher priority amendments. So the state did two really important things in their work. 2020, I believe it's 2022, and the prior year, maybe 2020, they added two requirements. One is around solar, and one is around floating solar. So the first one around solar, and I'm paraphrasing, and please go look these up yourself if you're curious. The first one around solar required that a solar facility be permitted in all agricultural land use categories in a local government comprehensive plan. And then it refers to all agricultural zoning districts within an unincorporated area. City of Bonita Springs is not an unincorporated area, it's an incorporated area. And the city also has no agricultural future land use categories. So in many ways, that first element of solar is not very relevant to the city of Bonita Springs. We have determined that because agricultural is a use in a land use category, it doesn't make it an agricultural land use category. So if you have questions about that distinction, please let Carly know, or please let us know so that we can take a deeper dive with you on that one. But we don't really think that the solar requirement is all that relevant to the city. The second one that we really need your help on is around floating solar. And I've gotten so many questions that people have said, well, what's floating solar? We've provided a couple photos of what floating solar is. And floating solar is anything that floats. And so it could be floating on an old retention pond. It could be floating on a lake. It could be floating on lime rock mine area, bodies of water. And so you'll see a couple pictures of what a floating solar facility is. But the state says floating solar is like solar, but it floats on top of the water. And the requirement from the state is that it shall be a permitted use in appropriate land use categories in each local government comprehensive plan. So what we need your help on is thinking with us about what is an appropriate future land use category. The state's not saying every land use category, but is saying we need to identify what appropriate land use categories may be, if any. And so that's a really important thinking process that we're spending a lot of time looking into. And so we really want your feedback on what you think could be appropriate or not, right? Either set of feedback is appropriate, because we really need some feedback from the public about that. And then the last thing the state did that you'll see just as examples is there's a number of name changes that the city needs to update in its comprehensive plan to be consistent with state statute. And those are sprinkled throughout. They're not substantive changes necessarily. They're really more to reflect consistency with a current implementing agency at the state, the State Department of Economic Opportunity changed its name, so we have to go back and also make those changes in the comprehensive plan. So those are kind of the summary of the state required updates that we'll need to make. I want to talk a little bit more about the optional amendments and some of the reasons why those can be really important for the city. So in terms of the comprehensive plan update, there's about these four things, A, B, C, and D, that are creating a few barriers for the city in terms of thinking about achieving its goals. So in certain elements of the comprehensive plan, you'll see some inconsistencies between the elements. It's important that the comprehensive plan be consistent because anybody looking at that plan might not know which is the most up-to-date. So for example, in a certain section of the comprehensive plan, it refers to potable water and the level of service for potable water. There's another section that has a different level of service. We believe that the newer one is the appropriate level of service. That was the city's intent. But those kind of inconsistencies can create confusion. So those, not too many of them, but probably should be updated. And then there's goals, objectives, and policies that aren't consistent anymore with the city's practice for whatever reason. So the comprehensive plan was first written in 99 and 2000 when the city first became a city. Some of those requirements fell out of practice. Some of them, as in number C, some of those policies have been completed. So getting that updated so that it's clear where the city's at now in terms of implementing its comprehensive plan can be really valuable. And then finally, outdated information and document titles. That the state prefers, of course, that you have current document titles and that, you know, if it's referring to storm surge categories, that's actually what those categories are called. So there's a fair number of outdated document titles that just need to be updated. There's a few of those that are substantive, and those are some of the things that we've asked for your input on tonight, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So those are sort of the updates. And then two, sort of amending higher priority goals, objectives, policies that would better accomplish the city's goals. We have a question regarding transportation that I'll talk about in a little bit that may be important for the city to update, and I'll get to that again. And then the third thing is the public participation element. Right now is very out of date because it refers to previous state statute. It also refers to processes that the city, because of state changes at the state level, the city does not engage in anymore. So we're really just wanting some feedback on tonight about what's working for you on public participation and looking at that element to see how clear it is. One thing I really want to reinforce that I did put in larger font is that we are nothing in this process is suggesting that any density be changed, that height restrictions are not changed, and we're not changing the future land use map. So that is going to be important, I think, for you to know that there's nothing that we're touching in terms of those areas. Now I want to talk a little bit about one of the policies that, again, is optional, but it's a good example of what's out of date. And I promise you I'm finishing up here soon, so in case anybody's getting antsy, I'll finish up here pretty soon. So the city in its housing element, that's the third element in the comprehensive plan. We have printouts of these, by the way, so you don't have to read all these words on the slide. It has two policies right now, policy 1.3.4 and 1.3.5, that place the city at the center of providing affordable housing. And it says that the city is going to establish a housing trust fund, which it has, but then also has other things that are very directly engaged in affordable housing that at this point, as government light, may or may not be in the right scope, right? So it has the city meeting with developers to develop incentives for reduced closing costs. It has the city providing grants or low-cost loans to provide infrastructure development costs, supporting administrative costs to Bonita Springs Area Housing Development Corporation, and that's an entity that no longer exists. And then finally, sort of acquiring land or providing low-cost loans to purchase land. We really want to engage your feedback on how can the city best partner to share some of these implementing kind of actions with other partners. And we can talk more about that. And again, you've been provided the specific policies so that you can see what it says. The other thing that we'll ask you to look at tonight is transportation and regional transportation impacts. We've provided this map of the city because we want you to really see the city's in the center of, in many ways, of traffic that goes between Collier County and Lee County. And so there's external pressures on the city to provide routes for people that are maybe not visiting the city, probably not visiting the beaches, but to access other areas of the county. So those pressures are increasing, and those pressures are there because of growth, as you know. And so one of the questions that we really want to pose to you as a public is, what tools would you suggest the city use to lessen some of those impacts on the city? And how to protect neighborhoods and community values as these transportation plans go through at the Lee County level or at Collier County level. So that's going to be some important things that we really are hoping you can help us with. And then the last thing, in terms of context, that we would like some help on is we've used some of these public participation tools in prior efforts to update the comprehensive plan. So, for example, in updating and looking at the evaluation and appraisal review, we use online surveys, public meeting comments, emailed comments, drop-in sessions, and with notification, we've used the e-blast, legal notices, and then word of mouth. So there's been some really active members of the public who've been helping us get the information out. One of the things we're curious about is that working for you, and what feedback could you provide to enhance those opportunities, or anything else that you would suggest as we look again at that public participation element. So that is the substance of the presentation. What we'd like to do now is release you to visit. There's 4 tables around the room, and we've posed these questions here at each of the tables. You do not have to answer each of these questions. In fact, you can write whatever you want on the poster or your public comments. So there's 3 or so different ways that you can provide some comment. One is you can write on the poster board that's on the table. There's a public comment form that's been provided. My guess is probably at the back of the room with the sign-in sheet, or you can email the comprehensive plan address. And we'll provide that. I'll update our slides and provide that at the end, but that's Comp Plan 2024 at cityofbonitasprings.org. Or, of course, you're always welcome to email me or email members of the staff. This is public comment and public information, so you're always welcome to do that. But at the tables, we have these 4 prompt questions. The first is around public participation. So what's your feedback on any of the tools we've used or the notices that we've used regarding plan updates? Is that working? And then the other is helping give us some feedback on which, if any, future land use categories are appropriate for floating solar facilities. And for that, we have a push pin. We have a map provided where you can put a push pin in that map to indicate where it might be appropriate. And we also think maybe that you'll have some narrative around that, so please feel free to put that on the poster. And I do want to just add too that, you know, any changes to the floating solar doesn't mean that it comes with no requirements. Any changes still have to comply with all of the rest of the comprehensive plan for conservation, intensity of use. So it doesn't mean you're going to see a bunch of floating solar on water retention ponds. There's still quite a few more requirements that would be required. But again, let us know what your thoughts are on that. And then the third question is, how should the city provide opportunities for partners to lead in affordable housing implementation? And then the fourth being, how should the city address external pressures on roadways to protect neighborhoods and community values? And when we're talking about community values, we're talking about things like aesthetics, things like safety, things like lighting, all of those things that are important to the residents of the city. So you have a bunch of friendly folks in the room willing to help you. So please go provide your input. Again, we'll stop about 6:45 to answer any additional general questions. And yes, go forth and let us know what you think. And it always requires someone to get up first. So thank you.
We are going to post Dr. Banyan's presentation on the city's website. We'll also make sure that the link to the city's comprehensive plan, which was in that Muni code, is with that link as well, so it's a little bit easier access. And we'll put a link to the comment page in case you want to enter your comments electronically as well. In case anyone's asked, it's comp plan, C-O-M-P, PLAN 2024 at cityofbonitasprings.org. That's the email address. But if you go to the city's website, we'll provide a link for this information. Just give us the evening. We can continue to get comments through
just wanted to offer to meet with anyone who didn't get the complete answers to your questions tonight. The email address for this process, again, is compplan2024@cityofbonitasprings.org. You can always submit questions and comments to that address to be answered by staff. Next steps also include LPA meeting on February 22nd. They'll be hearing these amendments. And we are tentatively looking at March 5th for our next public workshop. And we will send out another e-blast once those details are confirmed. It will likely be here, but we have not confirmed it yet. That's March 5th. And then March 6th is the city council hearing. And we will also have open office hours earlier in the day to address any questions or concerns that you may still have at that time. Does anybody have any other questions we could address before we close out of here?
We're going to have a city council meeting in this building next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday is city council in this room, yes. 5:30.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks to Jackie, I see in the back, and Dr. Green, Victoria, who I don't see.
Who's on the side?
Harley and Arlene. Yeah, so again, thank you, and thanks to Jason for attending.
Thank you, Dr. Bannon.
Thank you, Dr. Banyan.
Thank you.